Today, the agenda is to briefly explain why Teradata and what is the purpose and what are the course content that we are going to discuss in both development as well as the DBA concepts. So, to start with the activities, like what we are going to do during this training session, like the first thing is that why we need to choose the Teradata. That is the main thing. Like people already, if they are beginners, then probably they should know, and people already working, they are experienced, they might have known to this, like what is the main purpose of the Teradata. So I'll just briefly explain what is the purpose and why we are choosing Teradata nowadays. So when we talk about the data and database, so everyday day-to-day activities will be on the online transactions will happen. It may be you can consider any of the market, something like you can go to the retail, you can go to the insurance, you can go to the healthcare domain, any of the banking, financials. So anywhere the online transactions will happen. E-commerce, maybe nowadays it is very widely spread, right? So the transaction that happens on the small databases, and that is they are all very simple and short transactions. You don't need to analyze any data, you don't need to do any manipulations on the data, you don't need to do a translations, transformations, loading. This kind of stuff is not required. Whatever the data we have, we just look at the data, we work with the data, and will come out. So those are all like simple online transactions, and the target, whatever we have, the data and the volume that we see in the database, the online transactions is very it's very small, maybe a few hundreds of GB, maybe a terabyte, or maybe 1 or 2 terabytes. So that is the size of the database you can come across. And when we talk about data warehouse, when we come into this, so if you go with any of the application, something like if you are into a banking financials, so a customer can he can open a fixed deposit, and maybe he is with the recurring deposit, or maybe he has some loans. So that is not a one-time transaction. It goes for an maybe few years, something like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? So we have to maintain the data for them, and we have to analyze whenever there is a requirement. We have to go with his past, his history. What was the transaction he started, or maybe what is the actual process, how many years of tenure he has, like duration of the loan, or anything, or it can be a fixed deposit for how many years, and what is the uh, rate of interest, how much we have to accumulate. We have to go with the compound. So how the details will be captured, and where we have to store. So this is not a one-time transaction. It goes for maybe multiple years. It can be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So this is basically a data warehouse. We don't every day we don't go with the data. Sometimes maybe once or twice in a month, or maybe once or twice in a year, we just look at the data. This happens usually in the insurance domain, life insurance, or maybe car insurance kind of stuff, healthcare, or it can be a loan, something banking financials. If they are working, then it can be a the loan wise, so the 10-year home loan or anything. So whatever the data we have, the online transaction, simple thing is that placing an order in a retail e-commerce. So that is a simple thing, one-time transaction. But how often you are dealing with that item, or maybe how often the item is purchased, this kind of analysis if I want to do, or maybe my business with other region, how it is, I want to compare the regional wise, how the data is, how the business is, similarly last year how it was, and this year. So when we talk about the data analysis, when we are looking at the comparison between the two entities, it can be a date wise, it can be a regional wise, or maybe you are comparing your business with internal regional marts you are dealing with. Then you compare the things, and if you see that, if you think that this particular region has less business comparing to the other, so what is the reason? If you want to identify the reasons, you want to implement new techniques, business techniques to grow in that particular region, then for all these things we need to have the past. What is the history of that particular business? How many items are coming and how many of them are purchased or sold? So these kind of stuff if we have, then the data will be huge, right? Maybe maintain it for 5 years or maybe 10 years. Like, so in that case the data volume is very huge. It may be it ranges from 1 terabyte to the petabyte, because nowadays everything is globalized. If you go with any banking domain, any big customers, something like Bank of America or maybe American Express, it can be a Citibank, anything. So their business is across the globe. So you receive the data, the data warehouse has the data across the globe, and the maintenance of the data is not from one particular region. It may be a centralized, but still it is not from the one particular region or maybe some part of the globe. No, it is across the globe. Individually for every region we have some data or maybe database or data warehouse, so that will come across and put it into everything is placed in one centralized system. So that is called a data warehouse. So this is global data mart, and every individual region has its own data mart, so that is a regional data mart. So when we are storing this much of data, the data volume will be huge. It ranges from 1 terabyte to the petabyte, anything. It may be even more than the petabyte. You can see 2-3 petabytes of data as well. If you are going with the e-commerce, so the data volume, the size of the data will be very high. The reason is that in e-commerce, along with the details, they also maintain the item description, and there will be some images for everything, right? They promote their item with their images. So that will be very huge. It's a kind of, the size of the data will be very huge. So in that case, how easily you can retrieve the data, how easily you can analyze your data, how quickly you can perform. So that here everything is dependent on the 4 parameters. So first thing is that how much resources, physical resources are required. That is first thing. Second thing is the maintenance, where we have to store the data, and how secured it is. Protection, how in what sense we are providing the protection. That is second. And third parameter is that how quickly you can, the execution times, how quickly you can analyze your data. And fourth one is that how effectively you can, or you can say how easily you can load the data or maybe transform the data from different sources, not from a specific source. It can be a multiple sources, right? We have to load the data. So the compatibility with the other services, other products, in fact other you can say reporting tools, or it can be any loading tools, so ETLs. So these are the 4 parameters where we need to look at, the customers look in, and they identify, they need to perform along with this. So Teradata is one which provides all these 4. The reason is that until maybe you can say 2014, 2013, when we talk about the data warehouse, it's only Teradata. The reason is that the data, it can handle a huge amount of data, petabytes of data, as simple as an online transaction or LTP application with very few hundreds of MB or maybe hundreds of GB. So the same way Teradata works with petabytes. So that is the main reason, and it has the very good, the hardware wise, it is very robust. You can, today my business is limited, maybe 500 or 1 terabyte of data I have, but my forecast is in come down the lane, maybe in 1 to 2 years the data grow to 500 terabytes. This is my estimate. I just started my business. Maybe I'm putting everything regional wise. I'm uh, spreading my business. So I receive, definitely I get more data. So my forecast is 500 terabytes. So today I have only 1 terabyte or maybe 2 terabytes. So I purchase a box from the Teradata, software and hardware, which is compatible and perfectly works with my 1 terabyte. So tomorrow, maybe after an year, the data is growing, the data volume is growing. Now I have to expand my system as well. The expansion doesn't need to decommission everything whatever you have and you have to bring a new one. No, that is not at all required. You can simply add. It's a kind of plug and play, kind of like USB, whatever we do the similar way. You can you can add new system to the existing one, and you can improve your system performance. You can go with the many things. So this is like Teradata wise, that is the main reason. And when it comes to the performance, it picks up very quickly. It reads the data very often, like very fast, to be honest, because it has the parallelism. It goes with the scalability, and the parallelism is the main thing for Teradata. So that is the reason people choose Teradata, and most of the customers, they are into Teradata warehouse. When we talk about why we need like the benefits and the different versions we have, so in detail we can discuss in this course, and what are the different parallelism, how it comes from the software as well as the hardware. So those details will come in. So basically, a Teradata data warehouse is an enterprise data warehouse. Earlier we used to have, when we say data warehouse, the latest data that may be there for the maybe 6 months old, but now it is completely different. Now you hardly see the gap is between OLAP and OLTP is 6 to 12 hours. So it is reduced to that much level. So enterprise data warehouse is the main motivation, and that is the reason most of the people, they choose Teradata. Data modeling wise, yes, it handles any kind of data modeling. Something like you can go with the star schema, you can go with the hybrid models, you can go with any of the data modeling concepts Teradata supports. That is another advantage. And there are some maintenance activities are there for the DBAs, so those can be reduced. Most of the things will be done by system itself. Even for the developers also, when they create new when they develop new application, there also they don't need to maintain some tables and data. So Teradata automatically, the system automatically handles the situations. Similarly, performance wise, if you write a query that you think the query is optimal, but there is a optimizer, there is sorry, there is a software component optimizer which is well measured. It identifies what is the join operation we are performing, and can we go through a parallelism, can we implement it in a parallel process. So it identifies, it enhances the query it enhances the execution path. It identifies, if required, it rewrites the query internally, and it submits the job. It executes the query. So that way you don't need to worry about the query execution as well. So time can be reduced just giving few inputs to the system. So there are many things. So we need to provide some inputs to the system. Then it comes up with the very good execution plans. So this way Teradata is much better, and it is well measured. Scalability wise, you can add any number of systems if required, if your business is growing. That is one thing. Second thing is performance. It is go with the parallelism everywhere, software to the hardware level, everywhere you can see the parallelism. That is the second thing. And analytical. You want to analyze your system, the system performance should be well and good. So that is very high performance and availability, data availability, security wise, protection wise. Yes, there is a hardware and software level. We have many techniques you can implement as a developer, as a DBA, you can implement many things. And at the same time, hardware level, like when we purchase the box, there also you can go with many protection techniques are available. These are to maintain the system with high availability, 100% available for the end users. So we'll discuss in detail. This is why we need to go with the Teradata. Let's start with the what are the topics that I cover during this development and DB activities. Then I can open the forum for the questions. So first thing is that we'll start with the introduction, and then we'll discuss the architecture, the software and hardware components that we have in Teradata, like node wise, so system wise, server wise, what are the different platforms that we have. SMP architecture, we have MPP. So what is single system, why shared and shared nothing, both are implemented in Teradata, how it is and why. And we'll see some virtual processors, something like parsing engine, AMP, Binet. So these are all virtual processors where exactly the query execution processing will happen. So those details you will understand it better. Like we go with in deeply everything. Then there are some topics called PDE, TDP. So PDE is a parallel database extension, which is a interface between the software, Teradata software, and the operating system to maintain the physical resources, something like CPU, the RAM of the system. So these physical devices, whatever we have, if you want to maintain, so PDE will go with that. Similarly, TDP, Teradata Director Program, so which is the actual software of the Teradata, the RDBMS. So we also discuss this like call level interface, how you connect to the system, the interface, the protocol, TCP/IP protocol similar to that. CLI will be utilized. CLI, and we also discuss ODBC and JDBC, how they are connect, how you can connect to the system, how you can execute your queries. So those things we'll discuss. These are all software and hardware components, completely theoretical, but everywhere, whenever we write a query, we execute something. So all these parameters, all these software and hardware components will be utilized to execute your query. So we'll discuss in detail. This is to get the awareness how the Teradata performs and when we submit a query. And this is the next one is the recovery and protection. How quickly you can, recover the data if there is any hardware or software failure. What are the protection items, like how you protect your hardware and softwares? Something like when there is a hardware failure, is there any workload, balancing is there, or if there is any failure, how fault tolerance will be achieved. We need to quickly get the system back, or it can be something we should avoid the downtime. So how we can implement that? There are some techniques, and click concept is there, AMP clustering is there. So these are the hardware level where you can manage your systems, protect your system. When it comes to the software level, logical entity, like as a developer, when you develop something, you write a code. Maybe it can be a DML operation, something like you are inserting, or maybe you are updating or deleting the, you know. Sorry, any confusion there, Anwar? I was unmuted. So locking mechanism, this is to how to protect your table, something like entity. If you are doing an insert, update, or delete, and the same thing happens with the other user, he may also try to do the same thing, perform same thing on the table. Then how you can block his uh, transactions, so that you can complete your work at the same time, there won't be any data corruption. So how we can maintain that? So locking mechanism is the possibility. So we'll discuss in detail what are the different locks you can perform, you can place, and how they perform, what are the compatibilities, and why we need to go with this. So all these details we'll discuss in detail. And this is very important, like whenever you create a view, you may do some transaction. It can be a DML or DRL, anything. So how we can manage that, avoiding the table corruption, data corruption. So that will go in detail with the locking mechanism. The next one is that types of journals. We have three types of journals. The journal is basic thing is that in a simple manner, how you can do a roll forward or roll back. If there is any transaction happening, suddenly that has either you aborted that, or maybe system has aborted that query, maybe due to some reason, maybe database restart, or maybe hardware failures or something happened. Transaction was aborted. So in that case, how you can manage, how you can retrieve the data, roll back the data, roll forward the data. So that is done through a journal. So there are three types. Two journals will be maintained by the system. One will be with the developers who creates. They have to manage that. So that we'll discuss in detail. And virtual disk arrays. So this is called vdisk, virtual disk. So this is the buffer where you write your queries. Your queries will be executed. Any query, it can be anything. You may create a database, you may join multiple tables and you retrieve some data, you may do inserts, updates. Still everything happens in the buffer. So that buffer comes from the virtual disk. So that we'll discuss in detail. And coming to the next topic, this is the installation support. Support in the sense, like Teradata, unlike any other RDBMS, it is not freeware. First thing, we cannot get the software that you can install in your local machines, and we cannot work on that. So basically the software is not available. The RDBMS is not available. The client utilities, that software, it is available. You can download and you can install in your machines. But if you want to create a database and you want to create some tables and load some data, you want to manipulate the data, then that is not possible. So for that, what Teradata they are doing, they install new software, whatever the new version they implement, something like 14.0, 14.10, 15.0, 15.10. So whenever the new feature and new version is implemented, they install it on the virtual machines. They create an image out of that and they place it in the forums. So we can freely download that. You can download and you can play with that. So that is the it looks like a server, Teradata server, and it is completely on the /10 or /11. It's not Windows platform, it says /10. So we download that VM image, we play it through a VM player, that becomes our server. And once you connect, you can connect from your local machine, you can connect to the server, you can maintain this, like you can create your tables and all those. So you can explore the features and functionalities, but the resources, physical resources, are very limited in the VM image. But you can feel that you work in a busy system. You are maintaining a new server, so that kind of thing we can get. So I'll give you and all the links. You can download them, and in a class we set up everything so that you can start creating your tables and you can manage. And the next one is the client tools. We'll start with the basic client tools. These are the tools from which you connect to the database, you manage your systems, you may create your tables and anything. You write a program script, it may be a stored procedure, you can write a trigger, anything. How you can write and how you connect. If you want to export something, how you can export into an Excel sheet. So this kind of stuff can be done through the client utilities, client tools. So here few of them are for the developers and few of them are DBAs. BTech, SQL Assistant, Administrator, these are for both DBAs and developers, because to connect to the system we have to have a interface. So these are the client interface tools, and rest of them are for the DBAs to troubleshoot the system. Arcman is the backup utility where you can take the backup and weekly or monthly backups. So that can be done through Arcman. And database window is for the troubleshooting if the system is unresponsive. It is the performance wise it is pretty low, degraded. In that case, system DBA users cannot connect to the system, they cannot run their queries freely. Maybe there is a hardware or software failures, so that is the reason they are not able to perform that. So in that case, DBAs, they connect through database window, they identify what is wrong with the system, they troubleshoot the system, and they take appropriate actions based on that. So this is completely for DBAs. The next concept is the logical things, like what are the different tables we have in Teradata, how you can create a table, and different concepts are implemented, like set table you see, multi-set you can see, volatile and temporary tables. What is the purpose of these and how you can create them? While creating, what are the considerations? Those details you can discuss. We'll discuss. We'll create the tables. We'll go with the the examples, live examples, and we'll see how it works. If we miss, what is the impact on the system? While creating the table, if you miss something, then what is the impact on the system, day-to-day activities? So all these details we'll discuss. Similarly, views and macros. View, you can see multiple views. You can see secured views, you can see base views, business views, semantic views. So we'll discuss in detail while creating the view, what are the considerations. While creating the view, what we need to implement, locking mechanisms, how you can implement. And similarly, if you want to create a secured view, how you can create a view, secured view. So this is mostly like these will be for both DBAs and developers, but when it comes to the view level, how you can create, this is mostly for the developers. And macros is something like a method in Teradata. If you are executing the same query with multiple parameters, sometimes you use one parameter, sometimes you use different parameter, but the query will be the same, remain same. So in that case, you can create a template for that. So that is what macro. So it's a simple thing where you just change your parameter, you execute. So that we'll discuss in detail. Then the next one is for the administrators, how you manage the system, database management, user management, roles and profiles. So, and space management. Space management is something that we discuss with both developers as well as the DBAs. The reason is that if you want to create a table, where you create, in which space you create the table, and when you load the data, where this data will be actually stored. When you execute the query, how the buffer is coming up. So these details we come across, and that is very important, because when as a developer, if you run a query, you may join multiple tables and you execute the query, that fails with no more spool or no more room. In either case, how you achieve that, how you overcome and you load the data, you execute the query. So this thing we'll discuss in detail in space management. And for administrators, like how to create a database, what are the different types of databases we have, and while creating the database, what are the attributes, or maybe what are the considerations we need to have. And similarly, if you are creating a user, how you are creating, what are the different considerations, again, profile, role, how you are managing the access to the users, objects, and row level, column level, table level access rights, how you can database level access rights you can provide. So all these things will be discussed in detail in this slide, in these topics. The next one is the physical implementation. This is again for both developers and the DBAs. The reason is that while creating a table, we need to implement all these. You can choose, or you may or may not implement everything in whatever you see in this slide, but you have to consider at least one, that is primary index. When you create a table, you have to implement the primary index. What is the purpose of the primary index? Why we need to implement that? And what if the primary index, whatever we have chosen, is not proper? What happens? What are the consequences? How badly it can impact the system? How good it is if you have very good candidate, primary index candidate? So all this performance wise, how it is, data retrieval and data loading, both are dependent on the indexes. So what are the different indexes we have, and in each index there are multiple indexes, again multiple types of indexes. So we'll discuss in detail. And when it comes to the DBA, yes, he has to identify what are the different indexes the user implemented on the tables. Out of them, what are all utilized, what are all not utilized. If they are not utilized, why? How effectively he can force them to make utilize, like in the query execution. It may go with the secondary index, may not go with the secondary index. So if never happens, secondary index is not qualified, what is the reason? If it is not required, why we need to have this? So this kind of analysis has to be done by the DBA, and he has to clear them. Otherwise, it's an overhead to the system. So that will be identified by the DBS. So to know all these things, we have to know why we need to implement the index, what is the purpose. So that we'll discuss in detail. And the next one is that the basic commands. There are different transactions we have, transaction modes we have in Teradata, something like BTET, ANSI, and you can write a batch script. All this can happen, can be done through BTEC, the client utility. And query execution, query performance, how to identify the query execution plan, explain plan, and what are the points that we can improve, that we can provide to the system so that it improves the execution plan, optimizes the plan. So how you can do that, and collect statistics. This is this is a very important feature that we implement on the tables and column level. So that these are the inputs that we provide to the system through collect stats. So based on that statistics, the system will come up with a new execution plan. So that may be an optimized, or it may be underutilized. So we have to identify. We need to provide the better statistics to the system so that it can come up with the execution plans. So that we'll see in detail. And the next one is the performance monitoring. This is for the DBS. There is a viewpoint process monitor. So it's a browser application, and through which we can monitor the system. So we'll guide you how to connect to the system, viewpoint, and what are the different portlets. There are many portlets, around more than 40 portlets you can see. And not everything is important for us, like a DBA. As a DBA, what are the different portlets you can choose, and what are the importance, what is the importance of that, and how you can monitor. So query monitor is one through which this is the process monitor through which you monitor the system. So you need to identify bad run query, or maybe the query that is affecting the system performance. So you need to identify them, and same time we need to either you have to abort it, or maybe you can ask them to take appropriate action, the end users. So everything comes through the query monitor. So we'll discuss in detail what is the viewport and all those, and we'll provide the details about the DBQ, database query language. This is the auditing. Something like, simple example is that a user complains that I created a table and I loaded some data into the table last week. Now I don't see the data in the table. Table is an empty table now. So someone has deleted that. So he wants to know who does that, who has done that, and why it is happening. If it is something through a logical bug, a script has executed and that caused the issue, or maybe a user who intentionally, or maybe unfortunately he deleted the data from the table. So to know all these details, you have to go with the DBQ. Similarly, user complains, I execute this query every day, it runs for 2 minutes. Today it is taking more than 10 minutes. What is the reason? So you go with troubleshooting, like you identify if there are any software or hardware failures right now. If there is any system performance issues are there, then if it is isolated, like no, it is only with the query, then in that case DBA has to identify, is it really happening in 2 minutes every day, and today it is taking time. So to know that, the history of that particular transaction we should know. So that history details will come from the DBQ. So this is mainly for the auditing and the troubleshooting, to understand the history of the transaction. This is completely for the DBS. So the next one is the console utilities. This is again for the DBS. So system, sometimes system may be unresponsive, system may be down, or system the database is not properly responding. You may see some logs blocking everything. So during this time, how to troubleshoot the system, so that is important. So DBA can connect offline without if the system still, if it is down, still you can connect to the system and you can manage the troubleshoot the system. So these are the different techniques, different utilities we have, console utilities. So we go in detail. Maybe sometimes you have to go with a software upgrade, something like 14.02, 15.0, 15.10. So in such cases, what we can do, how you can perform. There are some pre and post activities we have to perform, like scan, disk, check table. If there is any anomalies or something corrupted tables, secondary index corruptions, if you see anything, we have to clear before we go for an upgrade. So how to identify such things and how to clear them. So those things will be discussed in detail in this console utilities. So this is completely for the DBS. And the next one is the development concepts, something like SQL functions. We have different OLAP functions, OLTP functions. Both we have for the day-to-day activities. So those things we'll discuss, something like see some qualify, rank. So these kind of things we'll discuss in detail. And different operations, SQL operations, something like set operators we have, unions we have, and join operations, something like inner join, full outer, left and right join. So these kind of stuff we'll discuss in detail. This is for again for the developers. And there are some join strategies. These are not traditional join operations, something like inner, left and right. There are many other. These are all join strategies like merge join, nested join. So these kind of join operation strategies we have. So those are implemented by the optimizer, the system. So if it is a product join, then that is the worst query that you can see. And if it is a nested join, that is the best query you can see. So how to achieve these? How to improve the join strategies? Optimize the join strategies. What are the purpose? So these things we'll discuss. So this is for both DBS and developers who wants to tune their queries, who wants to optimize the queries. So for that, we'll discuss, and performance tuning, query optimization. In what sense we can go with that? Different techniques, like some people say group by is much better than the distinct, but how really is it true in Teradata wise? So that we, if you want to know, like we'll discuss in detail in performance tuning. The next one is load utilities. This is completely for the end users, like developers. So there are different techniques to export the data, like loading and to retrieve, to generate a report. So we have fast export, fast load, multi-load, TPT, and VTech export imports. So these things we'll discuss in detail for the developers. When it comes to the DBS, we discuss the same things, but not the script level, but troubleshooting part. How if there is any failure with the multi-load, or maybe if there is a lag in the fast load, it is taking long, huge time to load the data. It maybe it has failed and now it is you are not able to resume the job, or maybe resubmitting the job. So what are the technique? What are the troubleshooting things we can go through? How to release the logs, and those things, those stuff we'll discuss with the DBS. So these are the topics that we cover during this training session. If you have any questions, you can ask.